Today's daf is Daf Chav Tes Amud Aleph. I am actually on the way home from being with my father, and I'm in the airport now. We'll have a share in the airport, but this year we're learning. So that my father, David Nachman Ben Yechevet Shifra, should have a full shlema. Yeshua Hashem Kehedef Ayin. It's Chav Gimel Sivan, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe says based on the Megillah. And on the 23rd day of Sivan, they annulled all the decrees. So Am Mordechai has the ability to annul the decrees every year on Chav Gimel Sivan. So when this follow the schus of the Teda, all the decrees should be annulled, and you should be well. Everyone should have a full shlema. Mishnah and Chav Tes Amud Aleph. Now, if somebody brings a get that you throw, we learned before already, you don't have to say before nechtav, either because everyone knows the laws of Lashma, or because witnesses constantly travel around. Everyone goes to the base of Migdash, so they're familiar. And if you're chutzlaret, you have to say before nechtav. So this Mishnah will discuss about appointing a shliach in Eretz Yisrael, and whether the shliach can appoint a second shliach. And then we talk about in chutzlaret, where in addition to being a courier, you also have to give testimony before nechtav. How do you pass that on to another shliach, or can you? So first, the Mishnah says over here, Hamevi get Eretz Yisrael. Somebody brings a get in Eretz Yisrael, the chola, and this shliach became sick. He can send it through another shliach. He can appoint another shliach, and he doesn't have to do it in front of a bezin, because really all they are is a courier. They're not. He doesn't have to give any testimony. If the husband said to him, "I want to give this get to my wife, but in return, I want a certain object from her." So he said to the shliach, "I want you to take an object from her," and I guess the leverage would be, I'll give her the get, provided she gives me this object. So first he mentions the object. Then you should not pass it on to another person. And why not? You cannot appoint another shliach. We'll discuss later whether the problem is that the get is not valid, or the problem is that you just didn't carry out a shliach, you're not doing the right thing. Because I want you to be the one I trust bringing me back that item. I don't trust anyone else. Okay, so the Gemara, Rav Kana said, when does this shliach have the right to appoint another shliach? Only if he was infirm. In other words, he couldn't continue with the shlichus. Says the Gemara, Pshita. What are you telling me? It says clearly in the Mishnah that he had to be sick. I would have thought, who had the same thing would have been Afagav the Loichol. I would have thought that a shliach, just like in other dinim, we know that a shliach can appoint another shliach. So I would have thought over here also, a shliach can appoint another shliach regardless. So why does the Mishnah say that the first shliach became sick? Generally speaking, the shliach would carry out the shlichus. Why is he passing on to somebody else? Because he got sick. Not that this is a requirement, just telling you a situation, circumstances. But that's not the case. It's only if it's sick. Says the Gemara, let's analyze this further. Hey Chidami, what exactly did the husband give? What instructions did the husband give? Idam Malef, he told him, I want you to transfer, I want you to deliver the get, or just be a carrier. Then I'm not so particular that it has to be you. I just want the get to be transferred to this woman. So even if you're not sick, why can't you have somebody else? If he said, I want you to be the one to deliver it, and I feel then even if you became sick, you have what agency do you have that you can just pass it on to somebody else when I strictly said I want you to deliver it? The Eid of Shimon Gamliel, and if it's the opinion of Shimon Gamliel, which we'll see later in the Gemara who that is, or what his opinion is, and even if you got sick, under no circumstance can you pass it on to another party. What's going on? Tani we learned. If you said Heiler gets at least, I just want you to be a carrier and bring this get, bring it through somebody else. Doesn't stipulate here that you had to be sick. And if he says at Heiler, case number 2, and you should be the one deliver it, gets at least do not send it to somebody else. And again, regardless, sick, not sick, you can't use anybody else. So our Mishnah can't be that opinion. Either case. What does Rav Shimon Gamliel say? He says, Benkach or Benkach. Whether I said, I want you to deliver it, or whether I said, just deliver the get, is Ein Hashliach or Shliach. You can never appoint someone else. So who is the author of our Mishnah? So the Gemara is going to say, we can learn our Mishnah in every one of these three ways. And just say that sick is an exception. Let's go through it. If you want, because I just said you should be the ones to transport it. Who the Chala? Well, the Bryce is explaining the Mishnah. When does the Mishnah the Mishnah is saying? Now this the Bryce says that if he said be a carrier, you can appoint another shliach. The Bryce didn't bother going into all the details, but it's only talking about if you got sick. You say more. I can say to my case number 2, he said, I want you to be the deliverer. The Bryce said in that instance, you're the only one who can do it. That's in normal circumstances. Sick is different because definitely the husband who wants to get to be delivered entertain the idea that if it's impossible for you to do it, let someone else do it. The boy says, a third way of learning it, that in fact, Shimon Gamliel says you can never appoint another agent. That's under normal circumstances. Chol is different. Okay, now we'll ask a question from our Mishnah to a Brayse. Now our Mishnah says, I made a get, so bring a get which connected to all the Chol. Got sick, you could appoint another agent. But I mean, we'll ask you a question. It says the following. If he said to 2 people, which are agent, and he said to them, kiss to get give a get to my wife, but he didn't give them a get. But he said, I want you to give a get. So obviously what you're really saying, he's applying is, I want you to be the witnesses. I want you to write it as well, because he didn't give them a get to pass on. So what they do is they write it and they sign it and they will deliver it to her. And they have no right to tell a Sefer to do it because he's telling them, I want you to be the deliverer of a get, which he didn't give them. What happened? He said, he turned to 3 people and he said, Kisfu get, I want you to write a get, and give it to my wife. And I'm telling you, I'm giving instructions, I want you to write the get. So because he said, I want you to write the get, therefore they're the ones who have to do it. What happens if he says to 3 people, not you should write, he just said, give the get to my wife. Then they have a right to tell someone else to write the get and give it because why did he take 3 people and he didn't tell them to write it? It's more like he created a bezin that they have the right to facilitate the whole exercise. So they could appoint a shliach. But what do we see from all this? So it seems from here, Inuin, only because he made a bezin and he told them, I want you to deliver the get, and so on, so they can appoint a shliach. But if he wouldn't have said that, a single person cannot appoint another shliach. Omar Abaye said, here's talking about a case where talking about not just delivering a get, we're talking about writing a get. Writing a get, they cannot appoint someone else unless the husband implied that. And why is that? House of time when it comes to writing, should be zoid about. It's an insult to the husband. It's an insult to the husband. What do you mean it's an insult to the husband? Because the husband, it's mandatory because the husband should write it, even though we learned before that a woman can write it and give it to the husband. The husband should write it, and it's obviously inadequate that he cannot fulfill his obligation. He's embarrassed. And therefore, if he asks you to write it, he doesn't want anyone else to know. And the shliach passes it on. Somehow or another, they'll become aware. We don't want that to happen. Don't want anyone to know. Here, we're not talking about writing. All he's asking him to deliver the get. So what's the big deal if he passes it on to somebody else? That's a Bai's answer. Rava comes down and lays down a very important rule. If I have a get in my hand and I'm appointing another shliach, all I'm doing is I'm passing the get, and all the koyach that comes with it, I pass it on to the shliach so that the shliach can affect the get. But where I did not have a get, I want them to write it. So what my instructions are mainly in the world of words. The world of words, it's not strong enough to pass it on to another agent. So you have instructions to write it, but if you don't do it, you cannot pass it on to somebody else. Rambam says, should it mean because there are words, words cannot be passed on to somebody else. Says at the end of the day, my benai, what's the difference? Explanation. So they're both saying basically the same thing. That a shliach cannot appoint another shliach to write a get. Ika benai, the difference is either because of design or because it's mili. The difference is shliach matana. Forget a get. A matana. When it comes to matana, the vendor or the donor doesn't have to, in any way, the benefactor doesn't have to write the shtar. In fact, the beneficiary has to write the shtar. So there's no embarrassment there. So as far as the buyer is concerned, the shliach can ask someone else to write the shtar. But if it's because of mili, even by matana, you can't. And in fact, it's an argument. Rav says matana ain't a get, matana is different again. But here is bazillion. That's why you cannot instruct someone else to write it. A shliach cannot appoint someone else. And by matana it doesn't exist. Matana again. Matana is just like a get. Says but further, the imam Allah, he told him to hey if he said to her, I want you to take this particular object from her. Says Gemara. Amar Shlaki says that can Shana Rebbe. In fact, what the Rebbe is teaching here is I don't want anyone else to carry this object. Whatever he's teaching here is that Ein Hashoyel Hashoyel Hashoyel. If I lend you something, you have no right to lend it to somebody else, because it says when I said that you shouldn't, in this case here, when I said, give the get, and I want you to get the object and to give the get. So the Shlaki says the get itself is still kosher. One thing has nothing to do with another. The get is kosher. But you shouldn't have done the shlichus this way because I want you to take the object, don't pass it on to somebody else. Why not? It teaches you the din is because you have no right. A person who borrows something cannot lend to somebody else. No, I trust you, I don't trust it. But the shlichus for the get is still valid. If you rent something, you're not allowed to rent it out to somebody else. You're not allowed to sub-rent. And Zoo, that's what the mission is teaching you. Every kid in school knows that. Ella, no, the mission is telling you that sometimes the shlichus and get also it unravels. If I told you to pick up an object and then give the get, sometimes that if you don't carry out my instructions to the T, that shlichus unravels. And when is that case? We'll see. And first, before we get to what that case is, sometimes zimnin the Gittin Daf that you didn't carry instructions, it becomes like the nase kimisha amar le'al tekashen advice. I said to you, instructions were clear. They want you to give the get when you see her at home. You give Shabali and you divorced her upstairs. Does it really matter whether you divorce her upstairs or downstairs? Absolutely not. Those are my instructions, and you have to carry it out. It's precisely the way I said it to you. I'll take Ashalim in the right hand, the Gish of Ismail. What's the difference? No difference, but those are my instructions. So this is how it works. The Kuli everyone agrees that if she went out to greet him, and she brought the object out, and then he gave her the get. The get, why should the get not be a valid get? Of course, the get is a valid get, but I didn't do the instructions correctly. I should have taken the object myself. He pligi, what's the argument? He said to him clearly, he gave him instructions. Take the chayfetz first and then give a get. And the reason for that is I'm scared that she'll refuse. This way you have leverage. She'll just give you the object because she wants to get. So it was precise. And what you did was you did was you gave her the get and then you took the object. As Rabbi Yochanan, and this was the argument. Even you did the wrong thing because I clearly stipulated I want you to take the object first. And the Shlakish says, as far as the get is concerned, even though the husband said it, it doesn't matter because he just said it. He wasn't that pedantic, and because he was convinced he'll get the object anyway because he's giving her what she wants to get, and he wasn't concerned that she would hold it back. So therefore, he wasn't that particular. That's the argument. Says the next mission, I may be getting this. Now we're bringing a get from overseas. Here, in addition to being a courier, you also are giving some testimony. Here's very different. The chola, you got sick. Again, you got sick. You can point another shliach, but only the bezin. You have to do it in front of a bezin because you have to save it for a nechta. And you send them, and you said before the bezin, before the nechta. You have to say that. Why? And the once you've established in the bezin that for the last shliach doesn't have to say it again when he brings it. In fact, he couldn't say it if he wanted to, because he didn't see it. Ella, all he has to say is shliach bezin. I was appointed by a bezin, and that's sufficient because we'll know then that the bezin who appointed and definitely heard from the original shliach those words of for nechta. We asked him a question. Shliach de shliach. What about your second generation already? You're not the original shliach. You're the second generation. Mash v'shliach. Well, can you make a third generation shliach or not? Amaluhu. So he answered back. Bavu answered back, without a question. The Tani Mishnah says, Ein Shliach Ach. If there are only two shluchim, then it should have said, Ein Shliach Hasheni. What do you mean the Ach in the last? As if to say, there's a whole line of shluchim, it doesn't matter. Mikal Damasha Shliach, you can point as many shluchim as you want, you can have 100 shluchim. One could point 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, and it's the last one that goes before the bezin, and it says Shliach Bezin. Ela kita boiluchu. My question is, Ki Masha Shliach Bezin, I finish Shliach Bezin. The first one has to appoint the Shliach Bezin because he has to say b'fan enechte, b'fan enechte. My question is, if the second Shliach appoints a third Shliach, does he have to say it in front of a Bezin or not? Later said to him again. Allah come about my question. It says Ella Oimer. He says Shliach Bezin ani, because he says that he's a Shliach Bezin. But clear what? So now what? That every single shliach is appointed. Number 2, appoints 3, number 4, number 5. They all have to be appointed in front of a bezin as you're moving from city to city. Obviously, you can no longer say for a nefesh or nothing, but each one will say shliach bezin ani, and the bezin then will appoint another shliach, assuming that the first bezin did all the right things. That's one version. Says the Gemara. And Nachman Yitzchak Masner Nachman just differently. Amle Rabbi Lavima, Rabbi Lavima, Ravu, Boim Ravu. That's a question the other way around. Shliach to Shliach, Kimash Shliach, the Bezin, the Shlei Bezin. My question is, when Shliach number 2 appoints 3, there's no longer before the Nechta, because you have to do it in front of the Bezin enough. Amalu said, why don't you ask a better question? Because you can have a third Shliach. To Bailuchu Yimash Shliach, number 2 appoint number 3. They answer back. There's no question that number 2 can appoint number 3. It's now we learned that the last shliach doesn't have to say for nechtim because the shliach mashlich. The last one is a whole bunch of shluchim. My question is, the bezin or bezin? The shliach number 2 appoints 3. Does it have to be before bezin or not? They said to him, Hanami like to there's no question. If you're learning from the Mishnah, you're learning the Mishnah is very particular in its words. Look at the Mishnah again. The Tani, it says, Elohim is shliach bezin ani. He says, I am a shliach bezin, and the only way you can say that is a bezin. He said you were appointed from the bezin. So every single shliach along the way has to learn from the bezin. Omar Rabba comes along Rabba and says, Shliach be'et Yisrael, oise kam shluchim. That the shliach in Yisrael can make a shliach, then that shliach can make another shliach, and so on and so forth. And you don't need a bezin at all. Why? Because you never said in Yisrael you don't say before the nechta, so you don't need a bezin at all. Omar Ravashi comes along Ravashi says, Im meis rishon, if the first shliach died, then batul kula shliach, even though there might be 6 shluchim. Number 1 appointed 2, number 3, number 4. But if the original shliach, the one who was empowered in the first place, dies, it all falls apart. He said, Hod Abba. He said, this was my father said, the Katnusahi. He said it when he was young. And interesting how expressed this by his father. Ilu meis bao. That's a simple question, he says. If let's say all the shluchim remained alive, but the husband died, would any shluchim have powers? No. Mashash midei mashash eat would be any substance. Kulu mikoich man kasas. Who empowers them all? Not the first shliach, but mikoich baal kasas. They come from the husband. Isla baal, isla kula. The husband exists; they're all there. Less of the baal, the husband is not there. Less the kula, none exists. In other words, the argument between Rav Ashi and the son is, according to Rav Ashi, the shlichus gets transferred from 1 to 2. And the Baal gives it over to the shliach, and now the shliach is in charge, and they're all representing the shliach. And according to Ma'abed Ravashi, no, that they all represent the husband. When the shliach number 2 takes over shliach number 1, he now represents the husband. Shliach number 3, he now represents the husband, and so on. They're not representing the first shliach; they're all representing the husband, and that's a machlekes. So, says the Gemara, so therefore the first shliach dies, the other shliachim have no problem continuing doing their thing. Says you want further, who Gabriel was a person, the Shadla Gittin Daf said to get to his wife. My shliach said, Lo yedanela. I don't know this woman. He says, I'll tell you what, you're going to the city. I have a friend of mine there. Zil Yovel Abba Bamenyume. He knows us. Go and find Abba Bamenyume. He knows my wife. I want you to appoint him as a shliach, and he will pass it on to my wife. Also, he came. He no longer lives there. What should he do? So he went to a bezin. He found a bavu, Rabbi Chanina bar Papa, and Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. And the Yosef of Safra Gabai, and they had a student of Safra, he sat there, and they were sitting there, Amrule, and they all said to him, give us instructions to us, we're a bezin. When he'll come back from wherever he is, we will give it to him, he will go and deliver it to the wife. Amrule of Safra. Safra turned to his 3 great rabbanim, and he said to them, this shliach was never appointed to divorce the woman. He was appointed to deliver it to Ben Yuma, to Abba Ben Yuma. So therefore, he doesn't represent the husband as far as the get is concerned. So how can he give you the kayach? Ichsefu, they were embarrassed because in fact, when the husband said, "I want Abba Ben Yuma to divorce my wife, not this person," so they were embarrassed. They passed it wrong. Rabba was pretty amazed. This Rapsafra, the young man, he cut off the legs of these 3 great rabbanim who had smicha, had a bezin, and yet he was outsmarted them. Says the Gemara, Rabashi in the next generation said, no, we didn't. Mika Amalei. Did the husband say, Abba Ben Yuma v'layat? Did he say, I want Abba Ben Yuma to give the get to my run to you? He originally pointed the first guy. The first guy said, I don't know who she is. He said, okay, give it to Abba Ben Yuma. But he never took away the first appointment. So therefore, he did give him the ability to go ahead and divorce his wife, and therefore they can appoint the best. Yeah. So, Mikamale Abba Ben Yuma v'layat, and not you. No. So therefore, they definitely can pass it on to a bezin. That's one version. Ikidami, another version is Amar Rava said all the way around. He tried to cut him off, but he was wrong. Why was he wrong? For the reason we just said. He was wrong because the husband originally wanted him to be the shliach to divorce his wife, and he never took that away. What's the mistake? What did the husband actually say? It sounded like he said, okay, you feel that you're not capable of giving my wife, that I don't want you to be involved anymore. All I want you to do is give it to Abba Ben Yuma. So Safra is right. They had no right to appoint a bezin to to appoint Abba Ben Yuma. Ugab is a person, the Shadlik, the said they get his wife. He said to the shliach, I want you to wait 30 days before you give it to my wife. Isnis begoit plus niyam. We learned in our Mishnah that the shliach is sick, he can appoint another shliach. What happened was he became sick. Within the 30 days, also the Kamei de Rava became before Rava. Amar Rava said, well, Chala got sick. What's the reason our Mishnah why one shliach can appoint another one? Because he's sick, it's not his fault. Mishum da'anasu, well, hainami anasu. This guy here, this shliach is also an anus, and therefore, in this case, he can definitely appoint another shliach. Later said to him, Mosa Mila Kame did. So he said to the shliach, Mosa Mila Kame did not. He said to him, go ahead and pass it to us, to our bezin, and then we will appoint another shliach. He said, before you have to do it from a bezin. The labasa twas yemim should be the shliach. When the end of the 30 days come along, we're going to hide a shliach. The other then will give it to this woman. At this point, he's not yet a shliach for divorce because he told him, I don't want you to give the get till after 30 days. This is, let's say, day number 15. How can you go to the bezin and commission them to appoint and pass them on a koyach which he doesn't have? The Rabbi said back, since after 30 days he can be garish, it's kishliach it's like a shliach who is empowered to give divorce even prior to that. In other words, the machlek in the Rav and Rabban is like this. If he appointed them a shliach to fulfill the shlichus in 30 days' time, so how do we view it today? The first 30 days, the day prior to that date, is the pshat that he's not chayiv at all yet. There's no shlichus at all yet until the shlichus starts 30 days later. Or is the pshat that he's a shliach now to make it happen after 30 days? And Rabbi says he's a shliach now to make it happen after 30 days, so therefore he's entitled to go to bezin. But Rabbanan understood no, that he's not a shliach until the 30 days come up, and therefore they said, how can he pass on to a bezin? So now they're going to ask the side thing. The problem is that the get now is 30 days old. How do you know the husband didn't get together with the wife and became a get yosher? We learned before that a get that took a long time is not a valid get because maybe they got together. And then if she falls pregnant, then there will be a mitzvah laws on the children that they're born out of wedlock. Says the Gemara, so they said to him, okay, but The Leichu Shabapai is why we worry that maybe the husband appeased the wife. Me like Tanan did we learn Ma'achshav, if he said, I'm going to give you a get from today. If I'm not back in 12 months, the mace if he died within 12 months, how days a get? It's a valid get because he didn't come back within 12 months. So the get retrospect is a good get. She's she's divorcee rather than the widow, so she doesn't have to be stuck with his brother. Avin Vayas, V'neicha Shamapais. How do we know that they didn't get together? Therefore, counsel the get. So Rav Huna said, this is what the Rav said. But it's talking about over there that he said, if my wife denies that we ever got together, I trust her. In other words, we don't really think that they got together. It's just that he could use as an allegation to try to cancel the get. But if he says before upfront, if my wife says we never got together, I trust her, he can never come along and allege that this is what happened. So the same thing over here. 30 days later, how do you get together? How can you use that get? Ichsif, Rava was embarrassed. The Seif at the end, the Gloy Milsa turned out to be the Arusa she turned out to be, she was merely betrothed. And therefore what? And there's a difference between a Nasuya and a Rusa. If they were married together and they were intimate already in the past, possibility will be appeased, come back together again. Just because by Nasuya, you can say the same thing by a woman who's really betrothed, they hardly know each other. So therefore, we're not worried that they're going to have any relation. So here we see the Rabba paskin, and even though he made a mistake, he had Sayat Shmai. This is Sayat Shmai is that he paskin correctly, even though perhaps he didn't think it through at the time, he missed out a point, but the Eibush to make sure and guided him that he would do it correctly. And actually the Nedi Behuda, when he was tested to become a Rav, they gave him a bunch of fruits to make brachas, and he made a mistake on one of the brachas. Which come first, the Shabbat Minim or eight, whatever it was. So he said to them, a Rav has Sayata Dishmaya. Since this was not practical, I didn't have Sayata Dishmaya. When I'll become a Rav of Prague, I'll have Sayata Dishmaya. Says Rav, I do have one question. When the Bezin appoints a shliach, let's say the first shliach, is it a fun of a shalei b'fanav? When a Bezin appoints a shliach, does it have to be in front of the first shliach, or even if the first shliach is not there, it doesn't matter. Let's say this shliach is sick and he cannot continue. So the question is, we need a Bezin or not? How the pashta bein b'lefanav, bein shalei b'fanav? It doesn't make a difference. That if, let's say, this the case we just had, he was told that after 30 days he should bring the get, and he told them that he can't do it. So when the Bezin appoints a new shliach, you have to bring the first shliach back, so he should be there at the time or not. And the dinner is not, once he gave the kayach over to the Bezin, they could do it on their own. Shalchu b'tam, they sent him there, bein b'fanav, bein shalei b'fanav. Whether it was in front of him, whether it wasn't before him, the Bezin, once they're empowered, they can do it as well. Okay, have a good day, everyone. We'll continue tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem.